No one wanted the bride for being too old, until a little girl pointed and said, "She's my mama." Chapter 1. The Bride No One Wanted. The bell over Dry Creek Chapel tolled noon, echoing across the dusty street. Townsfolk gathered, murmuring, fanning themselves under the fierce July sun. It was supposed to be a joyful day, another mail-order bride finding a husband, but the air hung heavy with something colder than gossip. At the front steps stood Evelyn Harper, bouquet trembling in her hands. The pale blue dress she'd sewn herself fluttered around her boots, the hem already kissed with dust. She was 35, not old by any means, but in a town where girls wed at 18, she was a woman past her prime. The fine lines near her eyes told of laughter long faded, of seasons passed in quiet waiting. The preacher cleared his throat, his voice echoing down the church steps. "If there's a man here willing to take Miss Evelyn Harper as his bride, step forward now." Silence. Boots shuffled. A few men looked at one another, but no one moved. Some women whispered behind gloved hands. A ranch hand snorted. Evelyn's heart tightened. Her gaze swept the crowd, faces she knew from the general store, from church pews, from the schoolhouse where she taught children their letters. Not one dared meet her eyes. The man who had written her, Thomas Baird, a widower in his 40s, had promised her a home, a family, a second chance. But when he'd seen her step off the stagecoach 2 days ago, his smile had faltered. That night, he'd left a note at the inn. "I can't do it. She's too old." Now here she stood, the laughingstock of Dry Creek. Evelyn's fingers tightened around her bouquet. She wanted to walk away with dignity, but her knees felt weak. The preacher hesitated, then folded his paper awkwardly. "Well then," he said softly. "Perhaps." "Perhaps what?" came a low voice from the back. Heads turned. Sheriff Clayton Reeves stepped forward from the crowd, tall and broad-shouldered in his dust-stained duster. His badge caught the sunlight as his blue eyes swept over the whispering faces before resting on Evelyn. "Perhaps folks ought to mind their manners," he said, voice firm. The murmurs quieted. The sheriff wasn't a man anyone argued with. Clayton stopped a few paces from Evelyn. "Miss Harper," he said gently, "you don't owe anyone your shame. You came here honest, with hope in your heart. That's more'n most can say." Evelyn forced a trembling smile. "Thank you, Sheriff. But hope doesn't fill a home." He studied her for a moment, the quiet strength behind her embarrassment, the calm dignity in her eyes even now. He'd noticed her before, of course. Everyone had, though few had looked past her age to see her kindness, her steadiness. The preacher sighed and closed his book. "We can try again another day," he murmured. But Evelyn shook her head. "No," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "There won't be another day. I think for
the little girl who called her mama." Morning came soft and golden across the prairie. Evelyn stirred from her rocker, blinking at the pale light streaming through the curtains. For a moment, she forgot the heaviness of the previous day, until she looked toward the quilt on the floor and saw Lottie, still asleep, one small hand clinging to the edge of the blanket. The sight pulled a smile from her heart. The child looked peaceful, safe. Evelyn rose quietly, brewed coffee, and set a skillet on the stove. The smell of eggs and cornbread filled the little house, and Lottie's eyes fluttered open. "Good morning, sweetheart," Evelyn said gently. Lottie rubbed her eyes. "Is this your house?" Evelyn nodded. "It's not much, but it's home." The girl hesitated. "Can I stay for a little while? Just until Mama comes back?" Evelyn's chest tightened. She set the spatula down, kneeling beside her. "Honey, your mama's gone to heaven. But you can stay here as long as you need to. You're safe with me." Tears shimmered in the little girl's eyes, but she nodded bravely. Evelyn wrapped her arms around her, the warmth of the child sinking deep into the quiet ache in her own soul. By afternoon, word had spread through Dry Creek that the schoolteacher had taken in an orphan. Some called it charity, others called it foolish. But Evelyn didn't care. Lottie's laughter had filled the house with something she hadn't known in years: life. She taught the child to read, to brush her hair, to say her prayers before bed. At night, Evelyn would hum lullabies she thought she'd forgotten, and Lottie would fall asleep with her head on Evelyn's shoulder. Days passed. Then weeks. And every so often, Sheriff Clayton Reeves stopped by, at first under the pretense of checking on things, then because he simply couldn't stay away. He'd knock on her door with a bag of flour or a jar of jam, saying the town had extras from a supply wagon. Lottie would always greet him first, running to the porch barefoot. "Sheriff Reeves," she'd cry. "Did you bring more stories?" He'd grin, kneel to her height, and hand her a peppermint stick from his coat pocket. "Only if you promise to listen to your teacher." Evelyn would smile softly from the doorway. "She listens better to you than to me." "Well, that's because I tell taller tales," he'd chuckle. Their friendship grew like the prairie flowers after rain, quiet, steady, and full of color neither dared name. One afternoon, Clayton arrived looking more serious than usual. "Evelyn, there's talk in town," he said, standing by her porch rail. She met his gaze calmly. "There's always talk, Sheriff. What is it this time?" "Some folks say you're keeping that child without proper papers. The orphanage in Fort Mason might try to claim her." Evelyn's face paled. "Take her away?" He nodded slowly. "They could. Unless someone with legal standing files guardianship." Evelyn's voice shook. "But who would they give her to?" "I have an